Jean-Claude Van Damme one-liners, Jean-Claude Van Damme jokes. When Jean-Claude Van Damme drinks pee, his asparagus smells funny. Jean-Claude Van Damme is the reason why Waldo is hiding. If you rearrange the letters in Jean-Claude Van Damme, it reveals his credo, I end lives. When Jean-Claude Van Damme goes to donate blood, he declines the syringe, and instead requests a handgun in a bucket. When Jean-Claude Van Damme jumps into a body of water, he doesn't get wet. The water gets Ven instead. Jean-Claude Van Damme is the only man to ever defeat a brick wall in a game of tennis. Jean-Claude Van Damme ordered a Big Mac at Burger King, and got one. Jean-Claude Van Damme can get Chick-fil-A on Sundays. Jean-Claude Van Damme has two speeds, walk and kill. Jean-Claude Van Damme can touch MC Hammer. Jean-Claude Van Damme doesn't wear a watch, he decides what time it is. Jean-Claude Van Damme played Russian roulette with a fully loaded gun and won. You don't hit Jean-Claude Van Damme, Jean-Claude Van Damme hits you. Jean-Claude Van Damme is not lactose intolerant, he just refuses to put up with lactose's shit. You are what you eat. That is why Jean-Claude Van Damme's diet consists entirely of bricks, steel, and the tears of small children. Jean-Claude Van Damme once beat Super Mario Bros. 3 without even touching his Nintendo controller. He just yelled at his TV in between bites of his fillet of child sandwich, and the game beat itself out of fear. Jean-Claude Van Damme has always been able to find Waldo, except for one time. He found himself stumped on the last page of Where's Waldo Now? Not being able to find the Waldo without a shoe. He threw the book down and screamed, "This is bullshit. They're all wearing shoes." He then proceeded to eat the book and exclaim, "If I can't find Waldo, then no one can." The book he ate belonged to a child that he had borrowed it from. The child began to cry and Ven ate him for good measure. The incident has since been referred to as Christmas. Jean-Claude Van Damme coined the phrase, "I could eat a horse" after he ate every last unicorn in existence. Jean-Claude Van Damme doesn't believe in rubber condoms. Instead, he sticks his penis in a girl, and uses that girl as a condom while fucking another. In fine print on the last page of the Guinness Book of World Records, it notes that all world records are held by Jean-Claude Van Damme, and those listed in the book are simply the closest anyone has ever come to matching him. Jean-Claude Van Damme can set ants on fire with a magnifying glass. At night, people with amnesia still remember Jean-Claude Van Damme. Jean-Claude Van Damme doesn't do push-ups. Instead, he pushes the earth down. When Jean-Claude Van Damme was born, the nurse said, "Holy crap! That's Jean-Claude Van Damme." Then she had had sex with him. At that point, she was the third girl he had slept with. In an average living room there are 1,242 objects Jean-Claude Van Damme could use to kill you, including the room itself. Jean-Claude Van Damme once walked down the street with a massive erection. There were no survivors. Crop circles are Ven's way of telling the world that sometimes corn needs to lie the fuck down. There is no theory of evolution, just a list of creatures Jean-Claude Van Damme allows to live. Jean-Claude Van Damme can divide by zero. Jean-Claude Van Damme was the hunter who shot Bambi's mother. He then wore her carcass like it was a coat while he made his rounds at the local children's hospital. The eternal conundrum, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, was finally solved when Jean-Claude Van Damme punched himself in the face. When the boogeyman goes to sleep every night, he checks his closet for Jean-Claude Van Damme. If you were to lock Jean-Claude Van Damme in a room with a guitar, a year later you would have the greatest album ever, it would sweep the Grammys. When asked why he doesn't do this, Van replied, "Because Grammys are for queers. Then he ate a knife to show the seriousness of his response. On his birthday, Jean-Claude Van Damme randomly selects one lucky child to be thrown into the sun. Jean-Claude Van Damme invented black. In fact, he invented the entire spectrum of visible light. Except pink. Tom Cruise invented pink.